How's it going, everybody? And welcome back to another installment of Tech Support Thursday. It is a Thursday, and I am going to be going through some of the questions that I've been getting recently and trying to answer them. I've been trying to do a better job of doing that through chat and answering questions directly, but I figured I've done this in the past, and every time I've done it, people have asked, "Well, can you like put a timestamp in when you answer the question and stuff like that?" So I figure at least you show them. They're all public. They're all public anyway. So at least I'll try to like go through the last couple weeks and answer them and get them caught up today. If you don't know how Tech Support Thursday works, it's actually pretty straightforward. The idea is you leave a comment on a video. It could be, you can pretty much ask anything you want on any video you want. It definitely does help if you ask the question based off the video you're watching, so I can do some research if I need to. But at any point in time, you can leave a comment, you can leave a question, stuff like that, and I will do my best to answer it. So with that being said, I wanted to spend a couple minutes going back through this because I really want to get back in the swing of things. I've been trying to think of different things that I could start doing content on, and I've just been work schedule has just been I'm having to like it's been kind of crazy. So I am going to go ahead through and read some of these questions off, and then obviously you'll see my answer, but I'm going to elaborate on some of them just because of the fact that leaving paragraph answers sometimes can be kind of a pain in the butt sometimes. So I'm going to start off with the first question, or the first comment. Thanks for the content, very nice share. Can you please provide the lab topology? Thanks and have a nice day. So just about anything that I create that is going to be Cisco related or have any relevance to Cisco, where I'm going to be on the CLI or in some GUI stuff. It's hard to do GUI outputs of topologies and stuff like that, but I do my best to create diagrams for that type of stuff. There is a join option under each one of my videos. I do have a membership option available on the channel. So if you are able to, if the join is there, it is country specific. So there's been some folks that have reached out in the past and been like, hey, I can't do that. And then I try to figure out a way to get the information to them so they don't have to deal with that. But if you click join, it's $10 a month. You get access to all the content, that as many network diagrams, and that's really what you're paying for. You're not the content I produce in the video is always free, right? I don't charge for access to that. What I do charge for is the topologies, config files, things like that, the time-consuming stuff. So you might think to yourself, well, are the videos time-consuming? And they are, but YouTube is a free platform, unless you want to go like YouTube, the paid version, which I do not. So I can get just about anything I want on YouTube for free, so might as well. So that is really where that comes down to. So if you have the ability to do so, hit the join button, pay the $10, you'll gain access to all that type of stuff. I am working on some things that I've been wanting to do for a long time. There were some stuff that got in the way. A lot of it was my studying for the VCIX certification, and I'm going to talk about that here in just a minute, and where that came from, because there's actually a question on it that I'm going to dive into that a little bit more. But essentially, you pay the $10, you gain access to that. If there's something that isn't there, you feel you have every right at any point in time to pause the video, take a screenshot of it, and then you can recreate whatever you want. So I can't control the things that are out there once they're released. So I do my best to be as accurate as I can, but it's up to you for some of that stuff to handle that. So there you go with that. I might have missed it, but did the turn up of the feature VN segment VLAN base get missed? Had me confused for a minute or two when I was trying to add it to the VLAN. It's been a while since I've built one of these from scratch. We mostly work with from DCNM. DCNM is Data Center Network Manager. It is the predecessor to Nexus Dashboard Fabric Controller, or Nexus dashboard with the application of Fabric Controller. I am working on some content for that as we speak. So it's a GUI that is designed to help you automate the deployment of VXLAN fabrics. Instead of you going through and configuring VXLAN fabrics manually, you would use DCNM to do that. You discover your switches through DCNM. Once you import them into your fabric, then you can start pushing your VRFs, your VLANs, you do your external routing, things like that. It's pretty cool stuff. I don't remember specifically if that, I remember there being a problem, but I remember it being a SYN community was being missed because of the route distinguisher, route target information. So there's that. So I don't remember specifically, but it's been a while since I recorded that video, and I don't remember specifically what was missed. So, do you come across T1s at all nowadays? I'm learning about it from the Network Warrior book now, and I'm not sure how deep my understanding of the technology should be. So I do every once in a great while, and it's usually remote sites. There are the occasional bigger sites that will have them as well, but you gotta remember T1 is a reference to speed. It's not an actual like dedicated interface specific type of connector. So it's not like an actual like an SFP or a fiber or a Twinax. It's not like that. It's a speed, 1.544 megabits per second. I'll never forget that. So a lot of times you'll see them bundled in groups of 4, and typically they're tied back to, in my experience, this is going way back, 10 years ago, was tied to Frame Relay. I don't know if how widely deployed Frame is deployed nowadays. If I had to guess, I'd say it's probably not. It's been more than likely replaced with MPLS VPN. So there's that, or a ATM IMA, which I don't even remember what that stands for. So a lot of times you would get them bonded. You'd have 4 T1s in a group, which would give you 6 megabits of throughput. So, and they would be, you'd have like a circuit ID dot and then some like 0001 or something like that. That your provider would give you for your circuit ID, and then each T1 is a dedicated sub of that circuit. So you'd have like one main circuit, but then you'd have like, it would be circuit ID 0001 would be that location, and then you'd have dot 0001, dot 0002, 0003, etc. like a sub interface on a router if you're doing router on a stick, which I don't recommend you do. So as long as you know what it is, that should be more than sufficient. But just keep in mind that even though it's not likely to run into a lot of them, they're still out there. So you might have to do a little bit of Googling to figure some stuff out. Keep it up. You help me learn. You help me learned. You deserve all the best, my dude. Well, I appreciate that. I am. I try to do my best for everybody that's out there. On a scenario like this, dual hub, single DMVPN cloud, can I add another site as a hub? I'm trying to avoid losing all the DMVPN hubs when located at the same site. Yes, you can. And so the way that normally this is done is you're going to have your primary data center or your HQ location or whatever it might be. However, the DMVPN head end is connected to whatever is either internet circuit or private WAN, because you can run DMVPN over both. Done it multiple times. A lot of times what you'll do is you'll have another set of hub routers that'll be attached to another location. So like, for example, you might have a HQ location, you might have a colo data center that you might be connecting to, and you might put some routers over in your colo or in your AWS fabric, stuff like that. So DMVPN, in my opinion, outside of a certification world like a NARCI, the Enterprise Advanced Routing and Services exam, which is your what do they call it? The concentration to your CCNP Enterprise, or if you're studying for your CCIE Enterprise Infrastructure. I don't know any customers that are currently deploying DMVPN today. A lot of customers have migrated over to SD-WAN of some type, whether it's Viptela, VeloCloud, Silver Peak, a lot of stuff like that. I don't personally deal with a lot of SD-WAN at all. Every once in a while, I'll have to form a BGP peering to an SD-WAN device, stuff like that. But you can peer to it. It does work that way. It's a common design. I mean, we're talking 6, 7 years ago. I used to do it quite a bit. Nowadays, I don't. I barely ever touch. I spend more time in the data center networking, a lot on Nexus. Become very, very familiar with Nexus and stuff like that. But you can do it. As a matter of fact, one of the things that I'm working on, I'm actually working on some content for Nexus specifically. I'm like doing a deep dive on it. Kind of like what I did for Route Switch and Service Provider when I was studying for those tracks. I'm not going for CCIE data center or NP data center, but since I work on the routing side of Nexus a lot, it just kind of serves the purpose. So I'm working on some content for that. You guys will be getting some updates soon. I'm trying to like trudge through it right now to get it done. But with that being said, that's kind of where I'm sitting with that. So I'm also looking at doing I've been kicking around the idea. I don't know if I'm actually going to do it, but doing like a CCNA series, focusing on CCNA and then taking that and then expanding upon that for CCNP. So focusing on the Encore exam, so the CCIE written replacement, as well as doing an RC. And then doing some sort of large-scale topology, but it won't be specific to an RC. There will be some smattering of Palo Alto in there to make it more real-world, because I don't have any customers that run Firepower or ASA anymore. All of my customers to date deal Palo, so I've become very familiar with Palo Alto. Work with a lot of really good Palo engineers, and I'm thinking about incorporating some data center. So kind of like what I did for the enterprise lab that I walked you all through a while back, but a different look and feel of it, to where it's a different design, a different deployment, and it's not a lab walkthrough like if you were going to sit for the CCIE lab. It's an actual like, okay, let's use this topology as a learning platform for CCNA and CCNP. And then I don't think I'm going to do CCIE. There's a lot that goes into a CCIE level training, and I honestly just don't have the energy to put that into. And when you go from CCNA, which is this many people, then you get down to CCNP, you're to this many people, because those are the two most commonly deployed. People, they're easy to achieve compared to CCIE. When you get to CCIE, you're in a much smaller group of people. Not saying that people that are studying for the CCIE wouldn't benefit from the training or the content that I would produce, but the reality of it is there's such a small demographic of folks that are going after CCIE nowadays that it just doesn't make any sense for me to try to do so. I think Wireshark got bugged displaying LLC instead of ICMP. What they're referencing here, LLC, logical link control, which is if you look at the layer 2 header, you've got basically a top half and a bottom half. The bottom half is the MAC address. The top half is the LLC. The LLC is going to reference the ether type value that is defined in the MAC address header. So if you're inside of the layer 2 header in the MAC, if it detects like a 0 by 800, it's going to detect that as an IP packet, and it's going to be able to tell the upper layer protocol. So LLC kind of tells is the top half of the layer 2 header, and it tells the layer 3 header, hey, there's an IP packet coming from. And if it's like an MPLS environment, it's going to say, hey, and I forget what the MPLS ether type is off the top of my head. There's one for VXLAN. The encapsulation will change the ether type value. But if you're dealing with VXLAN, let's say it's 0 by 2100 for kicks and giggles. I honestly don't know what it is off the top of my head. And it's like, oh, that's an MPLS header. 2101 maybe is VXLAN. It'll tell the upper layer protocol, hey, this is a VXLAN encapsulated frame. So that's basically where that comes in. So another question was, what's the difference between configuring XConnect under L2 VPN and configuring it just on the interface level, like you did in your first video about XConnect? So typically speaking, XConnect is also known as a pseudo-wire. And a pseudo-wire is essentially a way for you to extend the layer 3 communication from one site to another inside the same VLAN. So if I have let's say for example I've got two different locations and I want to be able to move a virtual machine from point A to point B, but I don't want to have to re-IP it when I do that. A simple way to do that would be to do an X-Connect to extend layer 2 over a layer 3 routed fabric or backbone, whatever you want to call it, between two different locations. And the concept is very, very simple. I want to maintain the MAC header, be able to ARP for it, not have to deal with any of the other garbage of re-IPing things and stuff like that. So that'd be the simple way of doing it. So a lot of layer 2 VPN is out there is used in the wrong way. I'm not going to get into the details of what that means, but layer 2 VPN is very commonly deployed, and what it essentially allows on the WAN for you to do, if you were to like be on a device that's on the WAN, type of show CDP neighbors on a Cisco box, as long as CDP neighbors is allowed to go across, you'll see all the communication. You see other devices on the other side of that's attached to that layer 2 VPN at other locations. So you'll see your HQ and your other data center and your multiple remote sites. Very commonly deployed. It's sometimes it's cheaper and it's faster in some cases than layer 3 VPN, but not always the case. So it depends on how it's deployed. It depends on how it's leveraged. But now that is a different design than if you want to be able to move a virtual machine from HQ data center to Colo data center, and you want to do a live VM migration. So the VM is working at HQ, you want to move it over to the other side, over to the Colo, have it continue to run for whatever reason. Maybe you had a major outage and you need to move stuff over. Most cases that is doable, but you have to deal with time to live. Is your time to live values fast enough? Is going to be your return time, round trip time, under 150 milliseconds. So there are scenarios where that could work. So in my experience, if I'm doing layer 2 VPN, it's because of the fact that I need to do some sort of layer 2 extension. I can't tell you that layer 2 VPN is any better than layer 3 VPN. I still know how to configure them. I still know how they operate. So I've also been kicking around the idea of doing some service provider content out there as well. But then again, it'd be for a very small set of folks. MPLS layer 3 VPN would be more for those that are studying for their CCNPs, and for the very small group that would actually go after the CCIE enterprise infrastructure, they might take advantage of it, but a single provider deployment. So I've got a bunch of content. Matter of fact, this person happened to be watching the service provider series that I did when I was studying for my CCIE, and unfortunately, no, I never passed the SPCCIE. I did take it though, and it kicked my butt. So the other part of what are you doing these days? Wanted to learn VPLS. So VPLS is going to be the if you have more than 2 devices that you want to be able to communicate with each other, you use virtual private LAN services. So basically, you're allowing multiple devices to connect to a single layer 2 service. They have a bunch of other capabilities out there as well, but none of them really matter. They're just how do you want to connect all of your devices together over the WAN. So did anyone solve this? I'm getting no ping for R1 to R3. X-Connect is up, everything seems okay. Gig 3 of CSR1 doesn't have an IP address. No need for IP route on R1. It's been such a long time since I've done that video, I don't remember specifically what that was. But if R1 and R3 are supposed to communicate over a pseudo wire or an X-Connect, a cross connect, then no, you wouldn't need a static route. They're in the same subnet. I've checked Wireshark. When ping from R1 to R3, ARP gets to R3, and R3 sends ARP reply, but it doesn't get past CSR3. My local and remote labels are the same, 21, which is completely doable, and both CSRP and on both CSRPE routers. That's a problem. And I enable legacy mode on network interfaces. Yeah, I can't. Okay, so GNS3, I just read that. So I don't know I haven't used GNS3 in years. I am 100% Eve across the board. So if you're running into a problem in GNS3, you're going to have to go look at the GNS3 community. see if anybody's done that. I can only speak for Eve NG. I'm assuming that you're using images from Cisco CML, Cisco Modeling Labs, as the replacement to Viral. For some reason, the XRV routers are there. They have the right template applied, but no image file is associated. I have to remove the XRVs and then add them back to the topology. Might be a version thing. That's a good question. So if you're building this in I don't know what you're building it in. If you're building it in Eve, I am using the Viral images, not the CML. CML uses XRV 9Ks. I believe there's XRV, just the regular, the non-9K versions, but I don't use those. And the reason why I don't use them is because they're basically, they've never been stable, for one, at least in my experience. The other one is they are, how do I put this? Especially if you're using it in a nested environment, like if you deploy EVE-NG as a VM inside of ESXi or Proxmox or VMware Workstation, then you're running a VM and then you're trying to run a VM inside of a VM, which is referred to as nesting. I have completely moved away from using EVE-NG as an OVA deployment. I am 100% Eve bare metal. Have been for a while now. I can't even tell you how long. So, in my experience, XRV 6.1 and change was the latest version I can get working without deploying the 9K, because the 9K is almost like you're deploying the VM and then you're running a service on top of it. Is the best way I can describe it. It's much more. It's like 16 gigs of RAM. I've heard rumors. Can't confirm them, that if Cisco ever releases a Cat 9K from CML that's not the beta version to do SD access, that it will also be pretty involved, like 8 CPUs, 24 gigs of RAM, something obnoxious. So I honestly don't know how that's going to work out. But yeah, I'm using the Viral version, and it's been such a long time since I've downloaded. I use an older version. Realistically speaking, the only thing you're going to be losing with using the older version versus downloading the new version is segment routing capabilities. That's really it. That, and if you really want to test layer 2 VPN on in the data plane on XR, I did test that a long time ago, and there was some variation of it that worked. I think XConnects worked. But it's been such a long time since I've configured any of that type of stuff, I don't remember what works and what doesn't. I remember how to use XR. I don't think I'll ever not, because of the fact that it's something I spend a lot of time learning, but it is what it is. So yes, it is the Viral version of XRV, but not the CML version. I haven't gotten the newer updates, and I don't really have a need to. A question for you. How do I advertise a loopback interface from a PE router into a VRF via BGP? So I went back and forth with this guy for a little bit, but essentially I do this a lot actually with customers to validate connectivity testing without having to do anything extravagant. So the simple way to do that is anytime you want to advertise a route, just to make sure that your routing is working. Especially when you're doing BGP. I do a lot of new BGP deployments, and customers are often very... what's the word I want to use? Skittish. They're very skittish. The best analogy, like the thing that pops into my head when I say this is like you see a cat that's like trying to paw at something. It doesn't know if it should trust it or not. And a lot of customer engineers are afraid that they're going to break something if they advertise something. Completely understandable. So then I'm like, okay, get me I usually have the 192, is it 192.02? It's an RFC IP address that you can use for documentation purposes. It's not routable, that type of stuff. And the idea is anytime you want to advertise anything in the network, but you don't actually have anything connected, but you want to make sure that BGP, the control plane's there, and you want to propagate a route without having to break anything, easy peasy. Create a loopback, give it an IP address, and then advertise that loopback IP address into BGP underneath the address family. So if you're doing an IPv4 unicast peering, most of my customers are service providers, so I don't have to worry about MPLS VPNs, but I do have to worry about VXLAN EVPN. So, which is essentially the same thing as MPLS VPN, except for the encapsulation is VXLAN and not MPLS. With a couple other amount of caveats that aren't really important. So, the idea is you go to the device that you want to advertise this thing from, as long as the BGP advertises routes two different ways. Either you own it, like the route exists on the box, the VLAN and the SPI sit on the device you're advertising from, or, which is the easy way to understand it, or you're getting the route to the router or the switch somehow through another means, whether it's BGP or an IGP. You're learning the route on the box, but then you're redistributing it into the protocol. That's how BGP advertises routes. In the event that you want to advertise something that you don't own, you have to create a static route for it, and then you can advertise it globally into BGP. But you have to own the route first. You got to be advertising it. So whether it's an SPI, a static route, whatever the case might be. So one way or the other, you need to own the route or have access to it directly. So if you're checking those boxes, great. The advertisement is simple. Create the loopback, and I do this for customers all the time, especially when I'm doing like multicast deployments and stuff like that. We'll do some very basic testing to make sure things work. We'll create like for example, in a multicast deployment, I will create a loopback in a device. I'll enable PIM on it, and then I'll have it join a specific multicast group, and then I will go to the source. I'll ping the IP. Boom! If I get a response from the device that I created the loopback on, with the IGMP join command, if I get an IP address response from that IP, I know I'm in good shape. So there are other ways of doing it. You can route from global into VRF. You can route from VRF into global. You can take routes that are in the global and bring them into the VRF, but specifics, I'd have to go look them up. I don't remember off the top of my head how to do all of that. That's more of a service provider edge kind of thing. When you start getting into VRF route leaking between whether it's global, the default VRF or the global routing table, or you're trying to go into a user created VRF, then it gets a little bit more interesting. Yeah, because you do have the option of doing a simple, if you're going from say one VRF to the other, you can just do a route target import export policy. That's a real simple way of doing it. But if you want to do a route map with a route policy and use a prefix list to determine what routes come across, then it gets much more involved. So that's one of those things where it's going to be use case specific, and you have to start throwing commands at it to see what'll stick. So, yeah, there's that. Question: does the SP Core exam already have virtual labs for configuration, or is it still based on questions, drag and drop, and multiple choice? I asked because I heard they were making changes to the SP Core exam to have virtual labs like we used to have in the CCNP routing and switching exams before. So when I took SP Core, they did have, I think there was 4 questions that I got that were essentially you had to go configure something. And I likened it to, they give you specifically what they want you to configure. They give it to you in a CCNP level understanding should have. Go to this device, configure this device with this routing protocol, with these variables, etc. Do the same thing on the other side. Make sure that they're configured this way, and then there you go. So yes, they do that. There was 4 questions, I believe, and they were both, all 4 of them were relatively easy to get working. I know. Relatively easy. If you've done it 10,000 times like I have, it's a piece of cake off the top of your head to configure OSPF, BGP, IS to IS. Really nothing complicated for me to do. However, and I think I talk about in this video, the CCIE version of that would have been, make sure you get this route to propagate to here, but make sure this, and this don't happen. Okay, then you have to know exactly what commands go along that process in order to make that happen. So they've worded it as you need to execute these specific commands here. So I liken it to the person in charge of the entire design has all the high level design. They also figure out the low level design. They got all the configuration figured out, and then they're passing on to you the script that you're going to be configuring. That's essentially the way that they've done it. So, did you do the deploy exam? What was your experience? I did difficult overall, but I did pass it. So we're talking about the VCAP NV exam. So I did take this exam back in March. Was it April? It was a few months ago. But anyway, it was done. It wasn't easy. There was a lot of digging that I had to do. I actually didn't do as well score wise as I thought I was going to. I was shooting for a 400, but I passed one way or the other. Bottom line is it's difficult. I am working on some content around VCAP. Well, it's going to be VMware NSX, but it's going to be focusing on the deploy part where we like stand up an entire lab, do the data center virtualization piece first because we have to build out everything and then we plug in NSX on top and then go from there to roll it all out. I am working on something for that. I actually have a dedicated server that I went out and bought just so that I could run ESXi 8 on. And you guys saw some of that when I was when I first got it. So that is my goal, is to create some content around that as well. It's diagram heavy though, because of the fact that it's not a topology that I can draw at Eve that is really easy just to drag and drop and all I'm going through the config process. Much more difficult than that. So that is basically where that comes into play. Not terrible, but it's just one of those things that's just time consuming. But I did pass, and the funny thing about that is I am currently waiting. So the funny thing about it was when you look at the exam that is listed here, the 3V04D122, I took that exam, I did pass. I passed the design exam for that shortly before that, I think by about a month. And the interesting thing about that particular scenario is when I took the deploy exam, I was assuming that as soon as I passed it, I would get the VCIX credential, which is what I was after, the VMware Certified Implementation Expert for Network Virtualization. That's what I was going after. Now, the funny part about that is the exam, if you go to VMware's website and you look specifically for the VCIX, it tells you need to pass VCP 2023. Here's the funny part. That exam, as the last time I checked was I think a week or two ago, or at the beginning of June, they have not released that exam yet. So, because they haven't released the exam, I actually can't get the VCIX done until I pass the VCP first that they required you to have. So they made a requirement for you to pass an exam that hasn't been released yet in order to earn a certification. So if you were going through VCP, let's say you pass your VCP for NSX in March, and then right after that, in April and in May, you passed your design and deploy exam, you would still be waiting for your VCIX because of the fact that you hadn't taken the correct exam yet. So, and you cannot take a VCP exam, the same exam number, twice. Once you've passed it, the only thing you can do is wait for the new exam to get released, pass the new version of it, and upgrade your certification to the new year. So yeah, that was an interesting one to try to figure out. I had to open up a ticket with support. They told me what to do. There's some training that I could take, but it's extremely expensive. It's well over $1,000. And so yeah, that's just, I'm kind of in like, okay, well, I passed the test. Now I have to just wait for the VCP to come out. When the VCP comes out, I'll take like a 2-week period of time. I'll go study some stuff up, make sure that I have all my ducks in a row, go take the exam, knock it out of the park, and go get my VCIX. That's what I'm doing. Thanks, VMware. Well, that is a huge network plan talking about VXLAN. Yep. So thanks for mentioning the reference book. How do you find the Cisco's building data centers with VXLAN EVPN, a Cisco NXOS perspective book? The book is good, but I haven't read the entire thing. I've only specifically looked at a few different parts of it that were basically specific that I was trying to dive into. It's not bad. It's just one of those things where you have to. It's a lot of trial and error, and there's a lot of moving parts with the VXLAN fabric, and you just have to take your time to learn each part and understand what's going on underneath the hood. I'd say that the books give you kind of a deep dive. The book that I referenced here is written by a guy called Tony Panison. I think that's how you say his name. He's European, but I don't know specifically from where. But one way or the other, the book is good. It's a lot of conceptual deep dives. So I used that when I was learning VXLAN, and it definitely helped with a lot of stuff. So and I deal with VXLAN on a regular basis. So that's like one of my key things, and I'm spending a lot more time in the GUI side of that with Nexus Dashboard. So there's that. Is copying allowed in CCI Lab? Because in CCNP you can't copy. Excuse me. Yes. So you can copy. You have Notepad is available to you, and a lot of people that are, when you're at that level, you're at the point now where you're basically able to configure everything on top of your head, or just about. So I will end up being, if I'm taking the lab, when I took the SP lab in 2019, which is almost, was it November? Yeah, it's been almost 4 years since I've taken a CCA lab. But when I sat for the SP lab, I spent a lot of time in Notepad with formatting configs, looking through the questions and then trying to answer them and stuff like that. It's a tough exam, regardless of what you do. But you're at that one of those things where you know the configs pretty much on top of your head. You've gone from the training mindset of learning all the technologies, right? You've transitioned out of that mindset into, now I have to pass the lab. So let's say it takes you 3 years to learn all the technologies on a particular CCIE track, and then you're like, okay, I want to go take the lab. Okay. What you won't be doing anymore is doing deep dives on how the RFC is written. You won't be diving into Wireshark captures anymore. That stuff is going to be days behind you, or months behind you. You're going to be, what do I need to know how to pass the lab? So you transition your mindset into pass the lab. You may not pass your first attempt. You may, it depends on the person. They don't make them easy, that's for sure. But one thing that I've learned quite early on when I was studying for the lab back in I'd say early 2015, was knowing, trying to learn trying to get better at the things that I didn't know. I thought I knew BGP well, and I really didn't. I remember sitting in the first CCIE lab that I took in April of 2015, and troubleshooting BGP, and I was like, wait, I didn't even know you could do that. And it's like I'm looking at I knew I had failed T-shoot within the first 20 minutes of it, because I think you got an hour back then. So instead of spending the remainder of the hour trying to solve one or more tickets, I just started looking at all the tickets and trying to understand how they were built. Because, like I said, I transitioned out of how do you configure this into how do you pass the lab. And I was still in a learning mindset for the most part, but I was now pull as much information out of the lab as you can. I took it home, I dumped as much information as I could into a lab, and I started trying to remember, I jotted down a whole bunch of notes, and I tried to memorize all the notes that I had taken, and I jotted them down while I was waiting for the plane, sitting at the gate, while I was in the plane on the couple hours that I had to fly home. I took as much information as I could from the lab that I could use to prepare myself for the next attempt, and I did just that. And the cool thing about it is when I did that, it was that really helped, because now I knew the areas that I needed to work on. BGP was one of those, and I can tell you from that I have gotten really good at BGP. I deal with BGP a lot, and it's one of the go-to things that I leverage. So, deviating from your question, yes, you can copy and paste. You also have access to the documentation. There's a web page on a Google Chrome or an Internet Explorer tab on your desktop that you can click on that will launch the documentation, but you have to know how to manually navigate it. At least you did back when I took it. You had to know where to go. You couldn't go to Google and type in iOS XE config guide for this version of code, and you need to source to BGP confederations, right? You couldn't do that. You had to know how to manually navigate to BGP configuration, confederations. What am I missing? Why is this Piri not coming up? And stuff like that. So you will end up, you're only going to have Cisco gear in the exam. So how much gear you're going to have, anybody's guess. I honestly have no idea. But one way or the other, you're going to have to spend some time digging into it. So that is it for this video. If you've held on for this long, thank you for stopping by and hanging out with me. Again, I am going to be working on content I'm doing a Nexus deep dive where I'm going through all the routing and VXLAN and a very large scale topology. I'm also in the middle of trying to write a book to release here sometime at the end of this year. It's a long time in the works. I've actually started quite a few books, but I've never finished them just because of the fact that I lose the motivation for it, or the job transitions me into another position, and I'm no longer diving into the content as much. I definitely do want to create content around the VMware NSX platform and all that type of stuff, but I am focusing right now just a lot on understanding, doing the things that I want to get done. So like, I want to do the Nexus book because I don't think there's really any really good book out there that covers it comprehensively and stuff like that. Hopefully it'll be useful for you guys. That is the goal. The other one is the VMware NSX series. I plan on doing one of those here in the very near future. And last but certainly not least is doing some CCNA and CCNP training. That's going to be taking an entire topology, because what I think a lot of folks are missing is the big picture. Like, have an actual full-scale lab that I walk you guys through, but it's not a lab walkthrough of, okay, configure XYZ on these 3 devices. It's not going to be that. It's teaching you how the technology works first in the series, and then taking that to the next level by putting it into play. So you're not just trying to, it's not going to be, you download a lab or you log into some training platform's virtual lab, and you're told enable EIGRP between these 2 routers. I mean, yes, that's important, but I don't think it does the justice that it needs to. With that being said, if there's something that you would like to see, if you guys have questions, leave them on the comments in the videos. I'm going to start doing this on a weekly basis. Take a few minutes, answer the questions. If there's something that if you have a question about that I haven't answered, leave a comment on this video. So yeah, you guys have a good one. It's good seeing you. Take it easy. Take care. Be good to everybody. Have a good one.